It's a real honor to be here. I'm trying to say yes nowadays to things where I can really share. This is a monument. Me telling my story is a monument to what God has done in my life. There's power in the cross. Okay, another Oswalt that has really been convicting me lately is how many times do I really skip over the cross and go to the effects of the cross? Well, the power of the cross is why I'm here. It's why all of us are here, really. It's why God has shaped me and disciplined me and molded me as a son in my life. It's been painful. I've had to bleed, as we heard last night, but I've learned to take great joy in those trials now. And I hope that, I pray that for the men that I mentor nowadays too. So let me get started in building this, putting these rocks on the shore of the Jordan to tell of the great things God has done. So I was born in Oklahoma City and lived there all my life. Not in Oklahoma City, but in Oklahoma. I was born into a pretty dysfunctional family. My dad and mom both were divorced and married 3 times. Third time took, though, so that's good. But my parents got divorced first when I was 8 years old, so pretty dysfunctional. My dad loved me, though, very much. I have 4 half-brothers and sisters, just kind of this mom, that dad, that type of thing. But, despite all of that, you would think, well, what are my chances, But we ended up, my dad married for a 3rd time. We moved to Fairview, Oklahoma, which is northwest Oklahoma. We lived in the country on a farm, and my mom was a nun for 13 years in Minnesota as a teacher, and she decided that was not the life God has called her to. She left the church. She went to Oklahoma and met my dad and started a family with him. I was 12. But she got us back into church. So we went to church at the Mennonite Brethren Church in Fairview, Oklahoma. We always called it Mennonite Baptist, so it's not like Holderman. It's, So we went there, and I remember very well when I accepted Christ at Boiling Springs State Park in northwest Oklahoma. I remember a youth leader asking me if I wanted to pray the prayer in the bunkhouse, and I did. And that was exciting, but guess what? I don't know that young man that asked me. I don't know his name. I don't even know what he looks like. But who I do know is Mr. Wichert, and he was a farmer. And when I was in 5th grade, I remember asking questions, and that was when it really was starting to come together for me. And so, I guess in saying that, never discount, you may not be the one that actually leads them in the prayer, but the one who's spending the time, he basically was discipling me in our Sunday school class that we had, and that's really what got me thinking. So I accepted Christ at 13, and I don't have one of these dramatic testimonies that is, I went off the rails and I did drugs and I came back, or I went wild in college even. I didn't do any of that. I right away got involved in a youth group. I was always a leader in our youth group in high school. I was in a singing group. We went to all these churches and sang every weekend. When I went to college, I got involved with the BSU at OU in Norman, and Max Barnett was the director of it then. He's like 91 now and just kicking and Some of you may have run into him. He has the whole Bible memorized. I mean, I guess if you live that long doing navigator's memory, you'll memorize the whole Bible. But got involved in the ministry team, went door to door, started my Bible study in my dorm room, really experienced discipleship for the first time, had a Paul. It was more relational. We didn't have OT. There was some things we did, but you know, he was 2 years older than me and trying to figure it out for himself too, Bruce Smith. But, you know, that was my first exposure to what that might look like. Like I said, I had my share of failures, obviously. I had my share of sin, but I didn't really go off the rails. So I get my engineering degree. I'm a civil engineer. Get my engineering degree, and then I start kind of going through the motions as a young Christian businessman. Get a job in a time when there wasn't any jobs. Got a job with Jim Cobb at Cobb Engineering Company. They had, I think, 5 people at the time, and their office was in a house, converted house, and it was the only job. It was during kind of the oil bust days in Oklahoma, and so I had my resume out, but there was no jobs. So that was kind of a blessing from God right there. He just called me. I went over there, hired me that day. I was very thankful. I didn't even know what I was going to make. I didn't ask, didn't care. I had a job, you know. And my friends were going back trying to get masters and stuff because they couldn't get a job. And so I went to work, and it was the first paycheck. I got my first paycheck. I'm like, oh, that's okay. That's cool. I got a paycheck. Yeah, yay for me. And then the next paycheck I got, it was a substantial raise. I was like, what's going on? Well, he had gone to ODOT and asked his buddies, what should I pay a new grad? And I was underpaying you. I went and asked him, you know, so I was underpaying you, and like, oh, okay, well, thank you. I was going to be happy with the other, you know. I didn't really care. It was just kind of interesting. But, you know, you graduate from college. I got married to the love of my life. We've been married for 37 years. And you know, get a job, you know, start saving for that house, right? You know, then here come the kids. We have 2 daughters, Alicia and Christy. And, you know, here I start my young family. This is, you know, all in the 80s. And, you know, you start chasing what everybody chases. And, yeah, we found a church. It was Crossings. It was called Westridge Hills Church of God in Oklahoma City at the time. My grandparents, who were very faithful God followers, introduced us to the church. And we started going there. It had 100 people. And today it's called Crossings, and it has like 9,000 or 10,000 people. Immediately got involved into the music program, got involved with leadership, was on the board, you know, all those things, you know, taught Sunday school classes, you know, all this stuff. Started the first community group, you know, all of these great, good things that you do. But it still was, you know, it's just, I felt like I was going nowhere. And I'm a D personality, which means I'm a driver. And so I like to achieve, okay? I like to stand out. That's kind of where my identity was, even in the church, at work. I've always kind of naturally kind of gone to being a leader. And so I knew that about myself, but I like unique things. I like to create things. And so I was doing that in those aspects. But really my identity was in my achievement, in myself. It wasn't necessarily for God. It was in His name, right? but it wasn't, my heart wasn't totally submitted before him. And so, so I started working quickly, I was in an office of 5. I didn't take long for me to kind of be over the office, the workers. And Jim Cobb, he was, when he hired me, he was in his 50s, well in his 50s then. And so, I just had my head down. Jim used to say he always said, asses and elbows. Right? I don't know if you've heard that, but that was their traditionalist style of work, and our officers run that way.
Iron workers.
Yeah, iron workers. Yeah. But it was a mom and pop shop, and Jim would go out and get some work with his buddies at the city or at ODOT, and I would do the work, and then I would run out of work, and I'd say, hey, we need some more work. And he would go get some more. And that's how it kind of ran until 91. In 91, it was a crash in Oklahoma City. It's like all the work, the government type work, city, state, just kind of stopped. And for various reasons. And we ran out of work, and Jim couldn't get more. So he had to lay everybody off. I think that we had built it to about 10 to 15 people at that time, and still in the house, working side by side. I was kind of managing everything. And in 91, he laid everybody off but me and one other person. And, said, he was trying to keep me because I could have gone somewhere else, obviously. And so he named me president. Wow, that's really cool. I'm president of myself.
Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations to me. Little did he know that didn't really mean jack to me anyway. But he, traditionalist mindset. He, titles are, important. So I'm like, okay, I'll be president. Fine. So we go on for a few years. I get some breaks with ODOT and, kind of start building some reputation. This time I'm in my 30s and really starting to build a reputation for myself, get some breaks on some decent jobs, and start building the company. And so as I'm building, though, I'm also still searching for this significance, I want to stand out. I want to make my mark, right? Isn't that what we all want to do as men? We want people to notice. Here I am. And so I started building bikes. I raced bikes and bicycles. And so I started building carbon fiber bikes. Nobody's doing that, And so I got actually world renowned for building carbon fiber bikes. I had people calling me from all over the world wanting these custom bikes because every one was a prototype.
What's the name of them?
Hepp Tech. Yeah, there's still a few out there, but now it's and everybody they're old, yeah. And there is a few. I probably built maybe 40 of them, but they were high dollar at the time because they're custom. But I was drawn, I always had a dream I was going to do that. I was going to make something that people wanted to buy, right? And be unique. And so I started down that road on the side and was working, at Cobb Engineering during the day. Ended up, had people working in my garage. I would work, till way in the early morning, and I'd write them notes, and then they'd continue to work during the day when I was at work, and wouldn't recommend that. It's not good for a young family, okay? Definitely made some mistakes. I was chasing my dream, right? Well, I had my plan, but God definitely directed my steps, and I'm forever grateful for Him for that. I was in the middle of it. I was making more money doing that than working at Cobb Engineering Company. And, but I had a fork failure. and I tried my hand at building a fork for the bike, and somebody got hurt, and then the same week another person called. I never met these people. I don't even know them. I don't have any insurance. Are you kidding me? R&D was me going out and riding the bike because I was a racer and I was thrashing it. That didn't break. Okay, it's good, you know. So 2 calls in 1 week. I was on my knees on the floor like a pile of goo. I thought my life is over, you know. I thought they're gonna take everything I have. They could have. They had every right to. But God worked it out. I was able to work it out. And the gentlemen involved were gracious enough to allow me to do that. I had to work my butt off. And then at that moment, though, I said no more. And, you know, it still has remained a hobby, but I don't make bikes for anybody else. And it took like three years of saying no to phone calls that I would get. But then God directed me to focus back on the company that He put me in. I didn't know that at the time, but He had plans, and you know, I was obedient to do that. He had to get a big old hammer, you know, because He knows what I need, and He did that, and He provided a way through. So, 97, Jim was in his 70s. And decided, well, you know, I probably better make him a partner, or else, you know, he might go do his own thing, you know. Looking back, I real at the time it was like, you know, I didn't really think that, but so he brought me in as a 49% partner, 49-51. Remember, he's a traditionalist, 51, and so. So we went on that way, and you know, we were unequally yoked. He claimed to be a Christian, but there was not necessarily fruit to that extent. But I pretty much managed it. So as a managing partner, he let me do whatever I wanted to do, and I just had to keep writing him checks, right? And I did lots of them, and made him a lot of money. And I made some money along the way too. But you know, things went along there and started really building the company. I didn't want to be the mom and pop shop. I wanted it to be a diversified, larger company that had more resources and could weather upturns and downturns in the economy as a service industry. So I did that, started building different aspects, and you know, basically just built more and more companies within the company, basically. And so did that during the 2000s. But about 2003, I ceilinged out. It came to me, we were out at lunch, and there was about 30 of us at that time. And we went around the table, had some guests there. Introduce yourself and what do you do? So they start going around the table. Well, I'm so-and-so, and I just do whatever Marty tells me. Next person. Well, I'm so-and-so, I do whatever Marty tells me. They go all around the room. Of course, I'm thoroughly embarrassed. And, but it was kind of an eye-opener. Maybe I'm not going about this quite right. Because they were doing whatever, you know, I said, and I wasn't really developing anybody. And I was stressed out, getting ulcers, all of that, because there's more work coming, and it was all on my shoulders. You know, I was doing everything, from the financial to the marketing to the production to the QC, you know, everything. And this wasn't working, and I had to do something different. So I started investing in leaders shortly after that. In the meantime, you know, spiritual life, I'm still leading Sunday schools and leading our church, you know, growing this mega church, playing church, pastor. I felt like I was doing a good job, you know, went through evangelism explosion, you know, yes, evangelism, you know. But was taught, and many of you might have come from the same experience, that my job was to invite them to church. Okay, I got to get them to church. If I get them to church, yes, good job. Now, Pastor, go get them. Maybe they'll hear something in the message. And then if I can get them into Sunday school, man, that's extra bonus. That's extra crowns in heaven, right? Get them in Sunday school, And not saying there wasn't fruit. There was fruit. There was discipleship going on, definitely. There were lives being changed. So I don't discount that. Don't take that the wrong way. But it still was very compartmentalized in my life. Okay? My faith was over here. The business was over here. My family was over here. And really wasn't doing very good at any of them. You had to choose to cheat, right? Okay, this season I'm got to cheat those two, and now I'm cheating those two, and so it was very much attention to direction. And so that's kind of, I was compartmentalized. Well, things are really starting to take off now in the company. It's still very stressful for me because all of my up and coming leaders were just that. They were pretty much fresh out of school, and I was in my 40s. And so there was close to a 20-year gap to my next, potential leader. But they still had some learning to do. So it was kind of method that I did because I wanted to raise them up. I was raised up. That's what I knew. And but there's this big gap, and it was tough. Now the payoff's big when you do that, but it's not an easy road. So things were starting to move, though, a little bit more. I was growing new aspects of the company. In 2005, I got introduced to CBMC, and at that time, they were trying to start a forum group at that time. And I don't even know if that's what they called it then, but I think it might have been. And so I kind of naturally said, well, I can do it. I can facilitate it, And so we had a group of about 10 guys, and I started facilitating this group. Well, Harold Armstrong, some of you know him, he came on in 2006. I'd been leading this group for a year, and I got to know him. Well, he kept on trying to get me to go to the men's prayer retreat in May. And I'm like, I'm too busy, a whole day of praying. What are you going to do in a day of praying anyway? I didn't have a guide like that, Gary. So he kept pressing me, and I said, okay, I'll go. And I went to this prayer retreat with a bad attitude. Okay, because it's your Friday night, Saturday. I got lots of things to do, at home. And but I went, bad attitude and all, and God did something miraculous in my life. During my time alone with Him, He spoke to me in a way that has never happened since. That in that way, He spoke to me audibly. He said 3 words to me. He said, I love you, just like we're talking right here. He knew that's what I needed. There's 3 things God has designed us to need. Every human needs these things. And one is to be accepted. The second is to be secure. And the third is to be significant. I am a guy of significance. I'm a driver. I like to make my mark. So I skip to that one, right? Even in my faith, I skip to that one, right? And, if I'm not talking about purpose, well, then let's not talk. But what he did in that moment, he filled in the blanks on, I am accepted. You are my most precious possession. You can trust me. I have you. And we had a conversation in that quiet time pursuing that. It was one of those gray hair moments I couldn't even talk about it even now. It's just one of those times in life it changes you. 2 weeks I couldn't talk about it. I tried with my wife and I couldn't. And then I finally was able to. But it changed me. It was a time of great submission in my life where it's yours. My life is yours. Everything I have, this company that I'm building, my family, my church, all of these things that I was building, it's yours. I trust you. Because I knew that he accepted me, he was for me. I didn't need a lot of help on the significance part. I needed the backfilling. I had a developmental problem in my life. And so Monday comes. This is Saturday. Monday comes, first call in the morning. I call Harold Armstrong, our area director. Harold, I know you've been after me for some time now to meet together. And, I didn't think I needed that. I was a mature Christian. What do you mean? Disciple me? What are you talking about? I'm a Sunday school leader. I'm on the church board, right? Harold, I will do anything you want. I will start at Christian 101. Let's go. And so we started meeting every week. I had to get over my spiritual pride. I had to submit my life. And God taught me something in that time. Later, as I reflect back, I know what it is now. Through times of great submission come times of great vision that God will give you. I submitted, we heard Stan last night. He's a 10-talent guy. He submitted 10 talents worth, and God gave him a 10-talent vision. Okay, I'm a 5-talent, okay? That's got to be okay, right? I'm not burying it. I'm a 5, maybe a 3, in there. But he gave me, within 1 week of my submission and starting to meet with Harold, he gave me a vision for my life. And as I came to refine that and gain clarity on that over the pursuing years, I knew that my purpose was to make disciple makers. And that became very clear to me. I knew, then I knew why he's led me into this company, why he's led me into the things I'm doing at church, my family. It was all coming together. So this compartmentalized life that I had was becoming one life. Yes.
How old were you at that moment?
46. So I wished it would have been sooner, but
Well, you weren't ready for it.
he was still working on me. It wasn't that he wasn't, but I wasn't submissive. I was proud. And so he gave me this vision, and it has revolutionized every area of my life. It's revolutionized. At that moment, I went back to the company. First thing I did. I've just been meeting with Harold for less than 2 weeks, and I'm already getting Timothy's. I'm like, ding, 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 we have a winner. This is what I'm made to do. And so I still meet with Harold. We've met for all these years, but I knew in that short of time, this is what I was made to do. And so I go back to the company, and I had some evaluations with my leaders. And so I had them sitting across my desk, and we were doing our little evaluation. I'd ask them, some questions and whatnot. And then at the end, I was like, oh man, it was like one of those battles inside, I should say this, I should ask it, I don't want to. And I said, how is your spiritual life? And every one of them, I met with 4 of them, every one of them, the response, oh, not too good. Well, how would you like to get together and talk about that? I didn't know what I was doing at that time, okay? I was just like Yeah, I'm made to do this. I need to ask my leaders where they are. I don't even know if they're Christians. And so I started meeting with 3 of them, out of that bunch. One was a lady, so I had to find somebody else for her. But so I started meeting with my leaders, and we started talking about real things, and started going through OT. And that's where I got my start. And then I've been doing discipleship, meeting with men, probably 4 to 6 every week since that time, and even in today. It changed the company because then I knew what investing looked like. I knew what it meant to invest in somebody's life, and it wasn't that scary. It was actually pretty easy. It was just a matter of how Harold showed me a track to run on. I'd never been shown that. I didn't know what that looked like. And it was really pretty simple. It's just relationship and with intentionality behind it. And so I started doing that. Now the company starts exploding. I mean, literally. All the things were lined up. God was just dumping stuff in our laps. And I found that the more I worked on the company, because I'd had times where I was like, okay, we got all this stuff. I need to just, nose down, get it going. The worse it did. Maybe I'm just not a very good leader or whatever, but if I focused on my calling to make disciple makers and that arena, everything that in that circle, all those other things were added too. The company did better. I can draw you a graph if you want. And so I discovered that, maybe I just need to work on investing in people. Instead of engineering projects, I'll engineer people, and that's how I kind of rationalized. So I became a student of human behavior. And I recommend that to any leader. If you really want to be an effective leader, become a student of human behavior. And that's a biggie. So, I kind of gave you, today, and I pulled it up, but it went off. Today, our company is called CEC, and the website, this is a building, this is our new building. Well, it's not new anymore. We built it we moved in 2013. Didn't know this, but I bring this picture up because it's like just an example of how God's hand is in this. It's like He's called me to this company. I don't know how much more clear it could be to make disciples, right? It's a platform, it's a tool. And if you look at the face of the building, the windows, this window over here, if you looked at the corner, it's supposed to be in the shape of Oklahoma. And there's one on the back side. So the architect had this Oklahoma theme, right? Okay. Well, we moved in, and then somebody gave me a call. Hey, have you ever looked at the building? It says 316. So look at that. You see a 316 there? Architect didn't know that. Nobody knew that. This building is known as the 316 building in Oklahoma City now. It's kind of interesting. I even let the architect know that. He's like, no, I didn't know that, So, but this is our headquarters in Oklahoma City. We have 2 offices in Tulsa, a small satellite in Duncan. We have an office in Allen, Texas. We're trying to break into the Texas market currently. And we have 212 employees as of last week. So we're the hottest engineering company in Oklahoma. We're at boiling point, right? 212. No, actually, we're the largest Oklahoma-based engineering company in Oklahoma. So, HNTB is larger, but we're Oklahoma-based, and you're not. You're not. So, but the thing I'm probably most proud of with CEC, it's like an opportunity to play church, you know? I do. I mean, that's what I do. And my assistant, God led me to this assistant. I didn't think I needed an assistant, but somebody showed me that I did. And she is the director of our civil servants program. And it's actually a separate company. And we do all of our outreach service. We're going on a missions trip the end of March. We go on every year. We encourage our people to serve. We have benevolence. We have chaplaincy. We have all kinds of Bible studies. And we run our Connect 3, C3 teams as an extension of that. We have a women's element, CCBW, connecting Community of Christian Business Women. Has similar format. We needed a place, CBMC in Oklahoma City needed a place for the ladies that were coming. Well, what do? We chop liver? And so we created that organization for them to settle into. And so there's a lot of things that happen through that. We're actually able to, through this organization, we actually use the signatory as we started out wanting to do it as a 503c, and we, it's just kind of gray when you're trying to do your own benevolence and everything. And so we kept the organization, and then we use signatory as the backdrop to our employees donate money, and it goes to them. They still get their tax deduction statement. Other companies that we bring together for causes, the money goes there. They still get their tax deduction. So it operates like it's a nonprofit, but it's not. So it's kind of a beautiful thing. And, yeah. Well, and in fact, Gary, Pete Oaks, I had Melissa get with their HR guy, and they're doing this system too. So yeah, they didn't know how to do it, and so Melissa just talked to him this week. So it's open. Well, I wanted to give you a little something on how God delivered me, and then talk a little bit about how CBMC has been a big part of the journey and living out the call in my life. So I'm running out of time, so I want to hand this out. And I'm going to go through this extremely quickly because it's not really a lesson. This isn't the time for this lesson, but this is important as it helped me through a major time in my life. So, yikes. We've heard a little bit about King David and Saul, even yesterday, and in our meeting. And I had a Saul in my life, and that was Jim Cobb. And he was a great man. He was a generous man, but he was a traditionalist, and if he was a Christian, he wasn't bearing fruit. He just had a different attitude about things than I did. And he was 80 years old by now, and it was becoming a problem because now my leaders are starting to come in, and they're going, white elephant in the room. We have this controlling partner that doesn't do anything. We don't see a future and a hope here. And I was in the squeeze, if you can imagine, because any one of them can go and do their own company. And my job was to create an environment to where they needed each other, right? So we had a guy whose whole identity was tied up into Cobb Engineering Company. And I felt it was my call to take the company from a mom and pop shop to an employee-owned, diverse, sustainable company. And that is faith-based. Should have put that first, sorry. And Jim allowed for that, but when it bumped up against some of the, it costs money to do faith-based, okay? To outreach, to provide systems to take care of your people and to go beyond the walls of your company. And so that's where we had most of our disagreements. But I had my Saul, and this story, it's actually, I take this from Andy Stanley. He tells this story, I think, in one of the tapes in the OT books, in the first book, I think. It's where he talks about this. But I created a whole teaching on this. But this is what I felt like I was going through. And so, briefly, you guys probably know this story already, but briefly, Samuel tells David he's going to be king even as a young, teenager, and whatever, old man. Well, then the events start adding up, and before you know it, we heard last night about how he's singing in the for Saul and his bipolarness, right? But then what happens? David's starting to, this could really happen. Now I'm a national hero. I killed Goliath, and the king's even offering me his daughter in marriage. I'm best friends with his son. I mean, how else could it stack up? And then what happens? Saul throws spears at him and tries to kill him. The first time, David trusts God, and he goes to the priests, and we know the story. Saul sends men, and they all prophesy. Even Saul himself comes and prophesies. So David is protected. God's hand is on him. Then David tests the waters again. And, the whole story with Jonathan shooting the arrow and all that. Well, then what does David do? He runs, okay? He runs to the priests again, but this time incognito, and it's a humorous story if you read the scripture. It's like, this is funny stuff. He goes in and says, my men are out there, and, I'm on a secret mission, and but all my men, they don't have any food. We were in such a hurry, we didn't bring food. Do you have any food? Well, yeah, that sounds kind of weird, David, but we do have food, by the way. It's the bread of presence. Oh, that will do. Well, ironic point number one, the bread of the presence. God is with us, right? Then he says, well, we got off in such a hurry on this secret mission, we don't have any weapons. Do you have any weapons? We're a priestly community. We don't have weapons. The only weapon we have is the sword that you killed Goliath with. You cut off his head with. It's right behind the altar there. Okay, that sword will do. Ironic point number two. Yeah, exactly. So the story goes on. He's on the lamb. He's running. He runs up to Nob, and then he runs up to that other Philistines, and acts like a crazy man, all that stuff. In the meanwhile, Saul's chasing him, goes to the Nob where all the priests are, kills all the priests. The chief priest's son makes it out, the only one alive, catches up with David up there at the top and says, here's what happened. All these priests were killed because of what you did. David couldn't see through. It all went dark on him when the spear started throwing. It went dark on me when Jim Cobb's like, this is my deal. I'm controlling owner. And I'm going, I know what God has called me to in this company, but I can't. It's the curtain's dropped. I don't see a way through this. It's impossible. David saw that too, and he ran. He was convicted. And we read 3 times in one chapter, he says, and then he inquired of the Lord. He inquired of the Lord. He inquired of the Lord. He came back. He repented. And then God took him on a journey back, a difficult journey back. It's where a lot of our Psalms come from, in those caves when he was running, right? And God's will was done, how the story ends. But great pain took place. I saw this curtain drop. I had mentors from CBMC like Harold and Steve Trice that surrounded me in prayer, that encouraged me, that pointed me to stay in the Word. I was overwhelmed in this point of my life. It was probably the lowest point, that and when the failures for the bikes happened, you know. But this was different because I knew where this is, like God had called me to this, and the curtain dropped, and I didn't see a way through it. Well, as God would have it, he miraculously took me through. I did not run because of this story. Because I knew that he's called me. I have to go through this, even though I don't see a way. And the only way through is by God, a miracle of God. And so he did that. And just out of the blue, it so happened that Jim and his wife, one day, just, well, there's a lot of details coming up to this, but I don't have time to go into all of them. But they wanted to sell all those shares because I had arranged something to where I had to bring in 3 junior partners. So I was going to have both of us sell, equal parts of our shares. But what that did is cause Jim to not be controlling interest. And so we show up to close on that. He has his lawyers there. Our lawyers are all there. All the people are sitting around this big conference table, and no Jim Cobb or Laverna, his wife. And so I had to call him from home. Hey, we got everybody here. What's going on? Oh, is that today? What? It's like, oh, God. So he shows up, and then they go into a closed door meeting, and just his lawyer and them, and we're like all still sitting there. We've been sitting there for an hour and a half. And we're going, what is going on? He comes out of that and says, we just want to sell everything. And we want to sell it for the price that was agreed to. And we're like, it's like, what?
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. And now, it's not as easy as that. That day was pretty miraculous, and that was the beginning of it. But then the weekend happened, and he gets to thinking, and the little greedy bug starts, and he comes back, and the next year was pretty much very, very trying, very difficult, a lot of bitterness. It didn't have to be that way. I wanted to honor him. And I tried to prove it, but he was very suspicious in his later years. But what that led me to do, we got through it, and the miracle, I have a graph for this, but I don't have it with me. It was front end loaded, cash. I had no idea how we were going to come up with that kind of cash. I mean, we only had maybe $1 million credit line at the time. And, we had to come up with over $4 million. And I was like, I don't know how this is going to happen. God provided amazingly. That very year when I had to come up with all that cash, we got the perfect storm. All these jobs just came in, and we made more money than we've ever made in 1 year in the whole entire history of the company. And so we were able to do that, and then the graph just follows it nice. And he gave us just enough to pay for the next 4 or 5 years. And we did that. And then today, we continued to grow it, and I didn't stop. I remembered my calling, and the company is not what I identify with. It is strictly a tool. It is a platform. So a month ago, to encourage you business leaders, a month ago I continued that transition and sold most of my stock. I was like at 80%. We did a transaction with the Signatory. I was down to 70. And then I did another transaction a month ago, and I was down to, I'll be down to 7%. So I actually have less than the other leaders. I will still be working there as president and chairman of the board. I even have an employment agreement. You know, don't really need one. I don't know why I did that, but just for the heck of it. And because I do need it as a platform. I don't need to be the president, but I'm planning on naming someone. I'm mentoring them right now and discipling them. And but one of the things God has given me, the gifts that He's given me that I know is a gift, is a gift of generosity. Interesting, because I'm a driver, and without that gift, I know how I am. I build something and I put every dime back into it because I want to build it bigger and better, right? That's just me. I don't care about getting it myself necessarily. I just want to build, right? Well, God has brought me and my wife on a journey of generosity, and you're going to hear more from Evan later on that. But we were introduced to that organization, and God spoke to me in a retreat that we had. It's called A Journey of Generosity, a jog. And one of the jogs that I was at, God was very clear to me. Whew, this is a test. He said, Marty, I want you to give away the entire value of the company that you've built, that I built, really. And I agreed to that. And so that's what I've been committed to. And you know, I've been doing on that path for some time, and even in this latest transaction, all the principal that I get for the value of the company will go right to the Signatory, and then I do have income that will offset that, so I get the golden slice. If I were just to do it, then I wouldn't have income to offset it, and it wouldn't work. So you know, anyway. And so, you know, that was a calling. And then quickly, the things that CBMC has helped through there, as I mentioned, I had Harold Armstrong, Steve Trice, a lot of other friends there in Oklahoma City that, you know, I prayed with, I cried with. They supported me, they helped me. Part of my calling was evident as God laid on my heart to, you know, I like to help other leaders, you know. I just am drawn to other leaders. I'm drawn to helping them find their acceptance, security, and significance in that order, right? And that's Operation Timothy, book 2, chapter 2. And so I have had a heart to develop community in our CBMC ministry in Oklahoma City. So I don't know, I just thought, hey, we need to start small groups, because we had lots of discipleship going on, which I was part of, individual discipleship. We had great, some of the best in the country, large corporate events like the Metro Prayer Breakfast and the Salt and Light Awards, but we had no community. And there, you know, we had a bunch of, what's the original sin? Who can tell me what the original sin actually is? And it's not pride. What is it? All of that is part of it, but it is the sin of independence. Yeah. Yeah. I want my way, and I want what I want when I want it, right? And so even in our ministry, we had a system of independence. Nobody knew each other. And we get together and say, well, how is your ministry going? You know? And how is your ministry going? And you'd tell, well, I'm meeting with 4 guys, I'm meeting with 6 guys, is this deal.
That's right.
And none of the guys know each other. It's independence. So we needed something to connect us. And so I wanted to start these small groups. It turns out National had C3 teams. I'm like, well, I'm not about reinventing the wheel, so I just used that model. And we started that. And, now we have 7 groups meeting around the metro, and I meet with every one of the leaders and co-leaders and trying to encourage them, helping me develop curriculum and everything. Part of YP group, Young Professional Groups. We have 4, and I lead one of those. I just love facilitating, asking questions. If you haven't been through coach training, do that.
March 27th.
That is one of the most impactful trainings that I've ever done in my life. Why? Not because you learn how to be a coach, but because you learn how to ask questions. That is the key. I'm having every one of my leaders in our company is going, 20 of them are going through coach training because they have to learn how to ask questions, to draw out from our clients, from our employees, from each other, import what's behind. What is the real question? What is the real motive? A lot of those things have come out of it. Discipleship is my favorite. Meeting with a man one-on-one. I'm experimenting with meeting 2-on-1, and that's working actually better.
Good.
I'm surprised. But very small groups. And it's been quite a journey. There's so much I could talk about. I hope that, that was a deliverance I had 2 stories of deliverance, and there's probably a ton more. But those are the monuments we build. Those are the rocks we're stacking up in our life. And telling those stories is part of that. Telling my story of, I'm giving the company away. That's not to brag. That's to say, it's God's company. It's His. It's not mine. I'm a steward, and that's what I call the owners that I brought on. We're stewards. I even train on stewardship. It's not yours. And there's sacrifice involved in transition. That's something I've learned. There's always sacrifice in healthy transition. Any questions?
Come here, brother. Don't sit down.
Okay.
Any questions for Marty?
You said you became a student of human behavior.
Yeah.
What were some of the tools that
Yeah.
you utilized for that?
So, I'm pretty simple. I'm there with Stan with the pea brain thing going on. And so I like to use simple methods, and the DISC method is what we've used. I've studied, there's some, the anagram thing that's going on now, that's really good, but it's hard to remember all of that. And so we train all of our people in the company, every person that comes in goes through the DISC, and they go through training on, how that works. And then the leaders have to go through a more intense way to do that. I like to do that with couples too, because you can, like when I'm discipling a man and my wife is kind of doing the wife, well then we'll go to a dinner with them and we'll just talk about that, and it's really a lot of fun to talk about. So we do that. There's lots of different ways, but that's one way. But anything you can do, like, books like even some of the secular writers just on team building and understanding people, but there's a lot of faith-based books. We have 5 books that we go through that are required reading. Nothing really so special about it, but they're required, and so that everybody, kind of like OT. Everybody's there's other things other than OT. It's really good material, but it's not the only one out there. But the thing is that if we all do OT, we have a common language. We know that's good business too. So, I do Lead Like Jesus. That's, actually we start with Principle of the Path by Andy Stanley. And that is finding purpose. That's kind of where this is part of the presentation out of that book. I have all the people that go through that. They do what we call a life path in the company. It's developing your testimony and looking back to see what's ahead, trying to get them to think about purpose and significance. And then we go into Lead Like Jesus, which is servant leadership, Ken Blanchard. And then we go into a business book, the Bible of business, good to great, which everybody enjoys that. And then we go into a new book that I found. I would hugely recommend it for any disciple maker, any leader. Wow, my wife loved it too. It's called The Power of Moments. It is excellent. And it is a secular book, but like Craig Rochelle, he's like a student of that book. And I think the authors are Christians, but they didn't write it with that tenor. But we do have faith-based type materials. And we definitely, I say we have a faith-based company. Well, we give permission to express your faith, okay? We definitely have probably 80% are not Christians in our company. But they know where we stand, and so when we teach or when we present, we say we're going to use biblical principles because this is a great way to build a company. You don't have to necessarily believe what we believe. It's not going to stop you from progressing in your career, but I'm going to use biblical principles because these are just sound, good, moral, aligned with our values. And so we do. We use Scripture everywhere. The thing that keeps me awake is I raise the flag pretty hard. In a bigger organization, you got to really flap your arms and to get it to move a little bit, right? So I flap my arms pretty hard for Christ, and it was bothering me because if I'm not flapping, my leaders after, I'm bringing up, they're Christian leaders, but they're not flapping that hard, in my opinion, right? I had to kind of let that go. It's not my responsibility, it's God's. And Steve Trice taught me that.